All right, I see we're live on Facebook, and I see some of the attendees already signing in. I see about 30, 40 people connected on the Zoom call. So maybe formally I could say good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Creative Zone webinar. This time we're doing this webinar in collaboration with RAK ICC, an entity that is from Ras Al Khaimah, is the Ras Al Khaimah International Corporate Center. We're going to hear a little bit more about what they do. We have with us Dr. Samir Al-Ansari. He's the Chief Executive Officer of RAK ICC, and Mr. Alan Bougourd, the Registrar at the RAK ICC. Before I go and start asking questions, gentlemen, thank you so much for connecting. It's very nice to have the opportunity to discuss this with you.
Thank you.
And we have also
Lorenzo.
Alistair Paine, who is our Business Setup Manager at Creative Zone. I'm going to give this another 1 minute or so to allow more people to come in. I just wanted to briefly make a quick introduction, and we will get started with this important topic of today, which is how companies like Creative Zone and RAK ICC are joining forces in providing another solution for options for people to set up their companies. In particular, in today's case, is with a bit more niche type of approach. RAK ICC is not a traditional sort of free zone type of entity. They specialize on other type of solutions that we're going to hear today from Dr. Samir and from Alan, who are going to be telling us which specific services it is that they provide. And Alistair, from our side of things as well, he's very familiar with this type of corporate structures, and he'll be able to also tell us how usually we've been supporting clients from our side. It's 15:02. I think we can slowly get started. So Dr. Samir, I can get started with you. Maybe if you could perhaps give the attendees that are here today and the people on our Facebook and social media live channels, if you could perhaps give us a quick introduction into RAK ICC. When was it established? What was the main mandate for which it was established? What is the main sort of core services that you provide?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, Lorenzo and Alistair and everybody that's joined us. And thank you, Creative Zone, for inviting us to participate in this webinar and to tell you a little bit more about RAK ICC. So I, in fact, both Alan and I joined RAK ICC in 2018. And the current form of RAK ICC is actually a merger of two offshore registries that were based in Ras Al Khaimah. One of them goes back actually more than 10 years. And the idea from merging those two registries was to make sure that the new RAK ICC is a world-class registry. And when we say world-class, it's about compliance, regulations, and setting the bar very high in a world that is kind of under the spotlight. And that world, of course, became under the spotlight with Panama Papers and Paradise Papers, and more recently Pandora's Papers, and so on. But what clearly has happened over the last 6, 7, 8 years is a clear shift, an undeniable shift away from pure offshore centers to more reputable jurisdictions, whitelisted jurisdictions, real economies, etc., etc. So very often, in fact, these days, the choice of which jurisdiction, and in some cases, which registry in the jurisdiction, has become more and more and more important. And so RAK ICC was created. The merger happened with the vision to have a world-class corporate registry that drives, in addition to our other sister companies in Ras Al Khaimah, whether they are free zones or onshore, to drive business, to attract business, to facilitate business from, in, and out of the UAE. And that, in a nutshell, is our mandate.
That's excellent. And maybe, Alan, if you could maybe pick up from where Dr. Samir is leaving it, what are the main products that you're offering, that you're putting out to clients? We understand that your sort of main services lie around the issues of SPVs, foundations, trusts. What can we tell the viewers on specifically what type of solutions do you provide?
So the main solution we provide is an international business company. So that company can be used for very wide-ranging activities. So there isn't generally an activity that you could think of that would operate so legally and legitimately in the world that you couldn't do through a RAK ICC company. And obviously companies are one form of, and obviously the predominant form, but you're quite right. We've introduced foundations recently, and they've been extremely successful, and they've been extremely successful in terms of asset holding, asset management, succession planning. Most things you can do through a company, you'd be able to do through a foundation, but there are obviously reasons why a foundation would be more appropriate. And you mentioned trusts. Yeah, absolutely. Trust companies or trustees can hold RAK ICC companies. So we can operate your traditional international business company. We can operate those on behalf of trusts. We can operate foundations. We really do feel there's a solution for everything you might want to do through RAK ICC.
And if you could give us a sense of the total number of companies that you have incorporated in this period that you've been in existence, or yearly, what's the sort of...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 30,000 is the number of companies that RAK ICC has incorporated. And I think a very important statistic is that the shareholders of those companies come from 160 different countries. So it truly is an international registry of a significant scale. And as Dr. Samir said, the reason for bringing this world-class registry in what is a fantastic location, right in the middle of everything that's going on with the real substance in the economy, and at the same time able to offer international services that one would say competes with other financial jurisdictions around the world, but in a real economy.
Excellent. Maybe Alistair, I can come to you now, and could you give us a sense? I mean, we've been working with RAK ICC for a few years now in terms of advising this jurisdiction to a lot of our clients, particularly for certain type of structures. Could you guide us a little bit on what are the traditional type of clients and what kind of solutions you've been advising to our clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lorenzo, and good afternoon to everyone tuning in. Absolutely, we've been working with RAK ICC really since its inception, since the merger of those two free zones, what is it now, 5-6 years ago, and it's incredibly popular. As Dr. Samir correctly pointed out, there's been a huge shift of people re-domiciling from the traditional offshore havens of BVI, Cayman, Panama, of course, and looking for strong, robust jurisdictions and registries like RAK ICC in what is arguably one of the best tax environments in the world here in the UAE. In terms of the sort of solutions we put together for clients, of course, a lot of our clientele are UAE based. So we use RAK ICC, SPVs, holding companies to hold shares of local onshore companies. RAK ICC companies can now own Dubai-based property. So we've seen an increasing number of expatriates using vehicles to own Dubai-based property. And of course, Saudi Arabia as well, which is a market we're fairly new into, coming up to 2 years now. But again, RAK ICC has a lot of advantages, people looking to hold assets in the kingdom and structure and protect those investments under what is a common law jurisdiction ultimately. So it's a real range of solutions. It's incredibly popular. And we'll talk a bit more today about the benefits and of course, how we can help everyone get set up there.
Excellent. Thank you, Alistair, for that. And Dr. Samir, we brought up the issue of sort of other competing destinations. We were talking about the BVI, the Cayman Islands, and others. Is this a challenge for RAK ICC to become well known as a brand that could compete or that is competing with these kind of destinations?
When you're the new kid on the block, there's always a bit of a challenge, but actually, in many senses of the word, it's actually a huge opportunity because you don't have legacy, you don't have history that's often, looked into and issues from the past that people like to dig up. So having a new, fresh, clean, world-class registry that set the bar very high from day one is a big advantage. But I think the most important aspect of our registry is frankly where we are. Being in the UAE makes a huge difference, and frankly for us all makes our life a lot easier, because as we've already touched on, the UAE comes with a lot of advantages, and the last 2 years have proven more than ever the success of the UAE and the flexibility and the ability to structure, whether it's onshore or free zone or offshore, and all of those things, of course, makes it an attractive destination. But I guess more importantly, in going back to why there's a migration from pure offshore and frankly small island jurisdictions, is the fact that this is a real economy. This is a robust economy. There is a full ecosystem, professionals, etc., etc. And with the introduction of economic substance regulations, this has highlighted the need for a robust economy, a deep pool of resources, the professionals, the offices, the rules, the regulations, all of those things. So all of that makes the UAE a very attractive destination. It is a mature banking system. It is a mature legal system. It's a 50-year-old strong economy with GDP per capita of $40,000. It's a place that's always ranked top 10 in ease of doing business. And there are some other very important distinguishing factors. So if we take beneficial ownership and beneficial ownership registries, the UAE's register of beneficial ownership is a private register. It is accessible to the authorities, but privacy is important. It's not illegal. And so when that information is collected, but kept private, it is an important differentiator for a lot of people. As we all know, there is no income tax or corporate tax in the UAE, and a very comprehensive network of double taxation treaties. Again, that is not illegal. All of us, we live here, we pay taxes in different ways, maybe indirect taxes, but there is no direct income or corporate tax. Makes a huge difference. The quality of life, the infrastructure, the connectivity, safety and security that actually all of us take for granted, and we only wake up to it when we're traveling to other parts of the world, is a huge advantage. And I think I literally read it 10 minutes before we came live. HSBC's annual report on best places to live in the world has just ranked the UAE the fourth most attractive place to live in the whole world. So, that is one hell of a statement. And I think it's a jump from 14th to 4th in 12 months. So to summarize, being a registry in the UAE has made our life, frankly, a lot easier. Every presentation we make starts with the UAE, not just geographically. Again, we're lucky we're in the middle of the world. Connectivity is very easy. Time difference with Asia or the Americas or Africa or Europe is actually very manageable. So we tick all those boxes. Now, when you have those advantages and you bring on board a registry that understands what clients require, that understands the complexities and changes in the global regulatory environment, that ticks those boxes, but actually also gives the clients what they require with service, with reactions, with pricing, with all of these things, it creates the recipe for success. Because to me, it's about longevity and certainty, not secrecy and tax avoidance. It's about estate planning, succession planning, wealth protection, and about ease of doing business, not hiding assets. So when we come up with products and solutions, we keep these things in mind. And I'd be happy to go through some of the corporate features, some of the legal features, perhaps later on if there are any specific questions on that.
No, you bring a few very good points. Thank you for that, Dr. Samir. And I like this analogy that you're making between Dubai being a developed place, a strong banking economy, This is what a lot of the other offshore jurisdictions don't have. They don't have that real economy. I think we were joking around how I used to have a company back in the BVI, and it's true, it couldn't even cross my mind to go to the BVI, to Tortola, and pay a visit where my company was registered. That's not the case of Dubai. You could be based anywhere in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Latin America, and you could want to come to Dubai, where is the place that you are based, legally and as a company. I think it really ticks so many boxes. Alan, I wanted to ask you, how competitive is it to set up an offshore company here in RAK ICC compared with some of these other jurisdictions? You come from Guernsey. You have a bit of an experience in this industry. How competitive is the UAE when it comes to offshore?
I think the UAE is very competitive because you have to look at the whole package. And we know that the corporate service provider service market in the UAE that you're very much part of is extremely competitive. It thrives on that competition. And so there is no issue at all in terms of price. In actual fact, you're going to find it better value for money to be operating your company through RAK ICC, because the RAK ICC company is probably the cheapest form of company that you can have in the UAE, and you combine that with the the competitive corporate service costs, you're definitely in a very, very strong position. But it's not just about price, it's also about the flexibility of the service. I was really pleased to hear Alistair mention the courts, because they're a key feature, the fact that it is a common law jurisdiction. But we actually look at it from the point of view of, why wouldn't you want to operate your company from the UAE? If your corporate service provider is based in the UAE, it's so much more straightforward for them to operate a UAE company on your behalf than it is dealing with in other international jurisdictions. Not only are you going to get an immediate answer, you're going to get a flexible answer. And really what we're saying is that when you look at the whole package in terms of price and service and reputation, we'll be on to a winner with a RAK ICC entity.
Mm-hmm. Now, this product has also sort of been competing with other established destinations here in the UAE. Alistair, maybe I can address this to you. Compared with DIFC, ADGM has had similar type of solutions. How could this be different to what RAK ICC is offering?
Yeah, absolutely. I think RAK ICC has some very clear advantages over those two jurisdictions you've just mentioned. ADGM and DIFC are the two regulated financial free zones here in the UAE. And of course, they have their perks as well, but they are quite laborious in terms of trying to set them up. It takes a lot longer. It's certainly more expensive. A RAK ICC vehicle we can have up and running in 2 days, or sometimes not even 2 days, sometimes even 24 hours. So what RAK ICC offers is tremendous value. As Alan said, it's one of the most cost-effective vehicles to establish anywhere in the country. It's also very efficient in terms of setting up, also maintaining as well. They're also very flexible in terms of amending their articles if you need to throw in different bits based on your situation or number of shareholders you have as well. So flexibility and value, I think, is what RAK ICC has over these traditional sort of offshore jurisdictions here.
And if I could add classes of shares into that, because that's one of the key features that gives you as the shareholders of the company the opportunity to give various rights to various types of shareholder. So a very creative product in terms of how it can be used to meet different needs.
And if I may add, thank you for those comments. They're spot on, and I appreciate the sentiment. Look, the one thing I wanted to add is the fact that I was involved when we created the DIFC in Dubai. I was on the board of the DIFC from 2004 to 2016. So I know the pains of growth and the successes of the DIFC. And the one point to highlight here is that there is no compromise whatsoever when it comes to compliance, AML, KYC, etc., when you're setting up a RAK ICC company. They're set up fast, efficiently, etc., not because we compromise on the compliance or regulatory side. It's frankly because we are smaller and we are more nimble and we are more flexible, and quality of service is what we live by. Not taking anything away from our friends down the road, but that's what we live by. And I hear it very often where our registered agents, our clients say, and again, no names, but it seems everybody else lives by what the computer says. You put the information in, the computer says no, that's the answer you get. We don't work like that. If the computer says no, we try and understand why and work with you to find a solution without ever compromising the quality, the standards, compliance, regulations, KYC, AML, etc. But I just wanted to clarify that because sometimes, unfortunately, because we are in the Northern Emirates, the reaction is, yeah, because you just, you take the easy route. That's why you can do it quickly. Your standards of compliance and so on are lower and so on. Absolutely not, 100%.
Good. Some good points there, gentlemen. Thank you for sharing these. I would like to remind the attendees that we're happy to hear your questions. I see 2-3 questions already posted, but at this time, I would like to ask you to put your questions either in the Q&A section box there on your right side at the bottom, or on the chat function. I'm also able to read a few from there. I see a few coming through. Maybe Alan, I'll send this one to you. It says, are you open to clients from anywhere in the world? Are there restrictions for any specific countries?
The only restrictions are on certain sanctioned countries. I think we'd all be familiar with the UN sanction lists. But beyond that, no, absolutely. And that's why we've got investors from 160 countries. Important to say that we do take a risk-based approach to the activity that Dr. Smears mentioned, the regulation and the compliance. So there will be certain countries where we may ask for enhanced due diligence, and we may need to see more about the company rather than the standard KYC. We'll want to understand more about what the company's doing, the purpose of it. But there is definitely no straightforward barrier to business beyond the sanctioned list that everybody would be familiar with.
Excellent. Maybe Alistair, you understand the RAK ICC product very well. If maybe we need some support from the team as well, we can ask. But it says, what type of licenses you provide? Are you open for branches of foreign companies? Could you please share the regulation interim of new business setup?
Absolutely. I think branches, subsidiaries are all possible. We've talked also about the various sort of structures you can have: foundations, SPVs, standard holding companies, international business companies. So there's a real range of products and legal forms one can take. So this, again, this all points to the flexibility of the jurisdiction. They're very flexible, they're very efficient, particularly when it comes to corporate shareholders. I think that's a very important point. Other jurisdictions can really drag their heels when dealing with corporate shareholders. So no, all possible here.
Can I just add to that, of course, with everybody moving away from pure offshore, and also with the introduction of economic substance requirements, and of course, a number of our entities are within the scope of economic substance regulations, income generating activities, etc. We've introduced more and more products, and some of those, for example, the premium product is a mix of a RAK ICC holdco and a RAK is our sister company, free zone subsidiary. And with that, you're able to meet the economic substance requirements, have a license to operate in the jurisdiction, have offices, employees, etc. So there are many other products, solutions, and services that we've introduced over the years to take into account some of these changes.
Good points. One sensitive topic is the issue of banking, especially in the whole country, in the whole UAE, is still proven to be a little bit cumbersome sometimes to open bank accounts for many types of different companies. What is the experience with RAK ICC? Maybe Alan, you can help us answer a bit of that. What can we put forward to people looking at this webinar how easy or difficult is it to open bank accounts in the UAE for RAK ICC setup companies?
So fully aware of the difficulties people have had, we've issued a banking guide to our corporate service provider, which gives them direct contacts in a number of banks that are fully familiar with RAK ICC and the business operations. And so that eases the process. We've also launched an initiative with a digital online bank, whereby as part of the incorporation process, you can effectively tick the box that says you're interested in a bank account with them, and we will automatically pass the company documentation through, again, to smooth the process of being able to open the bank account. And that initiative is going to extend into more banks over the coming months. So very conscious that it's an area that people have struggled with, and very keen to do everything we can to assist with the process. The feedback we get from banks is that if the company, the customer, comes to the bank with all of the information they know they're going to need, and is very upfront about who's involved, the customer's customers, the type of activity, then a lot of the problems disappear. It's when a company approaches the bank sort of unprepared that the problems and the communication breaks down. So we work very much in partnership to share the information that makes it possible.
Yeah, if I may add, Lorenzo.
Please.
So the digital banking solution, which was recently actually launched, has already proven to be extremely successful and extremely popular, and I can imagine that will take off. And we will add other digital solutions. But also onshore, there are several banks that we work with, and of course we work closely with RAK Bank. Our headquarters are in the RAK Bank building. So definitely we've been able to make some inroads there. We've also worked with overseas banks. And I noticed a question popped up a minute ago on whether we do work with overseas banks. Absolutely. In many jurisdictions, it's been very, very popular. And you know, this is a global problem, whether you're setting up a company in Hong Kong, Singapore, BVI, you name it. Banking is a challenge. It's the risk appetite of the banks. And we've tried very hard to look at all possible solutions to aid with this. And I think we've done a fantastic job at it. And that would probably explain why in the last 2 years, when most registries actually shrunk during COVID, we've continued to grow. So obviously we are doing something right.
Excellent. Alistair, from our side, we actually support clients on the whole bank account setup as well. What has been your experience so far with supporting RAK ICC clients of ours that we're setting up in RAK ICC, but also helping them open their bank accounts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Alan made a really good point there about preparation and being prepared when getting yourself in front of the bank. And I think that's where we can offer our expertise and experience. When one is not prepared meeting the bank, that's when problems can start to arise. So we have a lot of experience dealing with the local banks. As we've all touched upon here, banking in this country is slightly different anywhere else in the world. I think it's slightly more difficult as well. So we have relationships with several of the local banks. We have a very strong relationship with National Bank of Ras Al Khaimah, RAK Bank. But preparation is key. Having your documentation in place, which clearly demonstrates the concept of the business, who its potential customers will be either locally or internationally, information on the shareholders and so on, is key to getting the bank account open. But our team, our concierge team, work with all of our clients to put together this pack of documents and make sure we really get off on the right foot with the conversations in the bank. So I think we add a lot of value there.
Alan Gopika is asking, are clients able to approach directly RAK ICC for setup without going through a corporate service provider?
Well, I want to add to the comment that Alistair just made about the value that the corporate service provider adds. And for that very reason, no, you can't approach RAK ICC directly. We do operate through the corporate service providers. It's one of the reasons we're so efficient and effective. And can handle the number of companies that we have on a relatively small scale operation. is because we're very efficient and effective in our partnerships with those corporate service providers. We wouldn't want to be dealing directly with the client because of the value that the corporate service provider adds to it, and especially because most of our shareholders are not in the UAE, and therefore much more straightforward for us and for them to be dealing with a corporate service provider.
Good, good.
Recommend for Kopika to contact Alistair at Creative Zone.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
maybe at this point, Alistair, you can include your email on the WhatsApp, on the chat group, and people will be able to reach out to you. And if anybody would have to have more questions or want to learn more about the different options with RAK ICC, we're happy to support and give guidance.
Yeah.
Another big topic that we want to discuss today is the issue of Saudi Arabia and how many entities are using an SPV or a holding company to set up themselves in Saudi Arabia. Alistair, you have quite a bit of experience on this too. Alan and Dr. Samir, we agreed that we were going to talk a little bit about this option. I think you also have a lot of clients that are looking to expand into Saudi from the UAE. Alistair, I'll let you kick this off on the Saudi side of things. What can you tell us about, linking RAK ICC as a holding entity to operate a company in Saudi?
Absolutely. We're seeing, to be honest, a fairly big uptake of people structuring businesses there. A lot of our existing UAE client base have their sort of parent holding entity already in RAK ICC. So it's a natural move to have that own another operational business in Saudi Arabia. And again, relatively easy to do. And we also work with a number of GCC national clients as well, who are structuring businesses that way. And yeah, a lot of benefits, very easy to do. Yes, there's a bit of attestation, legalization work we have to complete here in the UAE at the Saudi embassy. Again, our team are well placed to do that, but documentation wise, it's not as onerous as it might seem. So that's one thing. Second thing, people that are looking to go into Saudi Arabia, perhaps they don't have an existing UAE business. Again, it's a very good option to protect yourself against the challenges you face both in the UAE mainland and Saudi mainland as well. We've spoken about legal jurisdiction. The protection that RAK ICC offers is ultimately it's a common law jurisdiction. In case you have a number of shareholders coming together, it's a very good option and very advisable, particularly for expatriates, to have the parent entity under a common law jurisdiction. It's a jurisdiction that a lot of expats are more used to and more familiar with. And under RAK ICC, you have the option of either going through ADGM or DIFC courts in the event of dispute. So yeah, there's two angles to it, but it's very popular for structuring things in Saudi.
And just to say, it's Saudi Arabia shareholders are in our top 10 in terms of nationalities.
I think the fact that the RAK ICC vehicle is considered a GCC vehicle also has a number of advantages, depending on who are the shareholders in the RAK ICC entity. Let's call that the holdco. This could also have an impact on taxation, whether they end up paying zakat at 2.5% or paying corporate tax. So there are many advantages, even pledging shares, doing the financing at the RAK ICC level at the holdco rather than the opco or the LLC in Saudi. So there's a list of advantages for doing it this way, and advantages that you would not be able to avail in using onshore vehicles, basically.
Very good. We have a question from David saying, are you expecting any change regarding RAK ICCs not being able to own 100% of mainland DEDs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, RAK ICC actually, sorry, mainland DED, or you're talking land, sorry?
Mainland DED.
So yeah, and depending on the activity, obviously, provided it's not one of the restricted activities still, but in general terms, yeah, and we're working very closely with the Ras Al Khaimah Department of Economic Development that would enable a RAK ICC company to own a company, 100% on the mainland. So yeah, absolutely, that's a theme we're working on at the moment. We're ready to go with it, and looking forward to seeing that expand. Absolutely.
Lorenzo, may I just want to go back to the Saudi point, because very important that clients see it in both directions, meaning inbound and outbound. So clearly there are numerous advantages to structuring inbound via RAK ICC vehicle, but also outbound. I mean, I've been involved in private equity for goodness, almost 20 years now, and I tear my hair out every time I see structures traditionally suggested by the law firms, because unfortunately the immediate reaction is to put structures forward that are either Cayman or BVI or sometimes even Mauritius, etc., when RAK ICC is an obvious solution. So, for example, and I use this very much when I go to the Far East too. The Far East traditionally blindly, when they want something offshore, they go BVI and not think about why. And I always tell our friends in China, if you're doing business in Africa, why are you structuring something via the BVI when you can structure it in the UAE, have a RAK ICC vehicle, take advantage of all the advantages that the UAE offers, the double taxation treaties with Africa, the ability to come to the UAE and then go to Africa if you need to, etc., etc. And the same applies with clients coming out of Saudi Arabia, whether it's to hold assets, whether it's to structure activities, businesses, investments into other parts of the world, the GCC, Africa, and so on. It is almost a no-brainer. It's for us, and this is what we're trying to do the whole time. It's education, it's awareness, it's making sure that people understand that you've got a very viable, world-class alternative to the traditional vehicles. And of course, that takes time. You know, it can't be done in a day or a year or 5 years even.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, the UAE introduced a set of important measures over the last 1 or 2 years when it comes to compliance and regulation, as we were discussing at the beginning of the conversation, purely with the intention of becoming a much more of a well-respected jurisdiction in terms of the quality of the people that are setting up here. What could we say, Dr. Samir and Alan, on those regulations and the type of compliance that needs to be observed when setting up in RAK ICC, when it comes to UBO, AML, ESR regulation?
Alan, do you want to go ahead? You breathe and
yeah, I thought you might want me to look at that. That is why I'm here. I came to the region with a background in these issues, and obviously I'm thoroughly enjoying sort of seeing the development that the UAE has taken in raising those standards up to the international standards. And I think it's important to say we're not doing anything more than you need to do elsewhere. And when we get companies that in the past haven't, required that level of scrutiny, and they're asking us why they're suddenly under that level of scrutiny, it's not that they should have anything to be concerned about. It is purely that we're meeting those international standards in a business-friendly manner. So yes, there's more compliance. Yes, there's more requests for information. Yes, there are more. It's necessary to provide us with more details than you might have had to in the past about the business activities and what's the business is going to be doing and who it's going to be done with. But no more than a corporate service provider would want to know anyway about the client that the client that's being onboarded. And so we're using electronic systems to do as much of this compliance as quickly and efficiently as we can. But nonetheless, there will be times when we'll come back to you for more information. And I can assure you it's not that we're being unreasonable about it. It's simply that we believe passionately in making sure the UAE can uphold those international standards, because the business won't continue to thrive here if we don't.
And it's a journey also. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a journey for the registered agents and corporate service providers. It's a journey for their clients too. It's very different to where things were 5 years ago and 10 years ago. The reason where I went from being from the board to being the CEO, the reason why we brought Alan in was because RAK ICC started that journey well ahead of almost everybody in the UAE in 2018. And that's why, frankly, we're also ahead of many registries in the UAE. And thank God we did, because that was clearly the direction that we had to take. Everybody was going to have to take, and it's put us in a very good position.
And this is the role that corporate service providers can play. Alistair, maybe something that you can add from your side of things. I mean, I've seen firsthand the role that we have played over the last year or so in informing and updating our clients on issues to do with UBO, ESR. I can imagine people that go on their own and they register the companies and they don't get this kind of support sometimes directly. We really had to hold people's hands and explain, you know, the policies. There's a question here that comes from one of the attendees. He says, do you assist with the UBO filings, or overseas companies needs to hire a lawyer to do so? What's the support that we can give people that register through us, their companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've spoken a lot today about the value of the corporate service provider, and certainly one of our big value offering is offering sort of corporate secretarial services in these spaces. UBO is mandatory now for every entity here, but AML and ESR, there are only certain activities that those sort of apply to. And what's also worth mentioning here is if you do decide to do it alone and you get it wrong, there are fairly severe financial penalties for doing so. So instead of sort of taking that gamble and that risk, coming to someone such as Creative Zone, where our packages are competitively priced, when you actually think about the experience and the work we're putting in, really is a no-brainer. So absolutely, we assist in all of these areas. It's part of our overall offering, and it's something that we're very busy with. And we always advise, come and speak to us, at least come and speak to us before filing, because as I said, if you do file it wrong here, you know, the penalties can be quite severe.
Excellent. Gentlemen, we wanted to ask you also, why Ras Al Khaimah? I mean, I'm familiar with the place. I love the vision that Sheikh Saud bin Sakir Al Qasimi has had for the Emirate. The Emirate has grown a lot. How do you feel being in Ras Al Khaimah, and a little bit of what's been taking shape over there over the last few years?
Sure, I'll jump in and try and answer that. I mean, like you, we also love Ras Al Khaimah, and for me, very often it's an escape because I've lived in Dubai for 34 years now. Obviously, I absolutely love Dubai and being in the UAE, but it provides an alternative that complements what Dubai offers, and is an alternative that complements what the UAE has, and whether it's the beaches, the mountains, the desert, etc. We have all that. It's a great tourist destination, and you know, you'd be shocked at the numbers if you follow those. But RevPAR in RAK is higher than anywhere else in the UAE, higher than Dubai, the highest actually in the region. So tourism and staycations in particular have been very powerful there. But what I love about RAK, and frankly the UAE, is the flexibility. You have the option, depending on what you require, to either have an onshore vehicle through the economic departments, or a free zone, or an offshore, even to combine some of them like our premium product, etc., etc. But what I would say, and I guess I'm in a privileged position to be able to say this, that what Ras Al Khaimah reminds me is where Dubai was, frankly, 20 years ago, when we had access to decision makers at the highest level, and I mean at the highest level, to drive the economy forward. And that's what we have in Ras Al Khaimah today, whether it's access to His Highness the ruler or the team around him, us all working together, being able, today I had 2 meetings with other CEOs of Ras Al Khaimah. It happened to be in Dubai, but we had those meetings and they were very fruitful meetings. And it's because we're able to work as a team. Dubai has been extremely successful, and I'm very proud to have been part of that story, but it's huge now and it's achieved. Ras Al Khaimah has that potential. It's 20 years behind, with the same potential, frankly, and with the support, vision, leadership, excitement that His Highness and the team brings, I believe we can do it.
Excellent. Alan, your take on that subject?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love living here, and you know, I live on the beach, 10 minutes from the office, so what's not to like? The infrastructure here has improved immensely over the last decade. We've got more and more five-star hotels coming online, really building up that tourist offer. And the trickle-down effect that has into the whole environment, whether it's the restaurants, the malls, the infrastructure for getting around. It's a wonderful place to live, and Dubai is an hour down the road if we need it. So yeah, really enjoying here. And just to emphasize the fact that we're 20 years behind in terms of the feel of the city, but we're not 20 years behind in terms of the attitude and the progressive nature to really bring it on. That's very much up to modern standards.
Excellent. I'm still reading a few questions from the attendees. Brian is asking, maybe Alistair, you can help. Can RAK be used for Saudi investments without previous operations and financial activity? There was a similar question that was talking about the need of having to show a 1 year sort of records of financial activity. What's the case on how we're going about this?
Depend on the nature of those investments. If it is company ownership that's being referred to there, look, as an expatriate in Saudi Arabia, to be a shareholder of a company registered there, you have to demonstrate that you own something elsewhere in the world. So unfortunately, there's no shortcuts to that. To our GCC national clients, who we have a great number of, that requirement doesn't apply to you, and you are able to use a RAK company without having a previous company registered anywhere in the world to own a Saudi Arabia company. So unfortunately, it will boil down to your nationality. But look, if the RAK company is being used to hold other investments, whether that's property and so on, then no problem. You know, it works very well for all nationalities.
Maybe also give a bit of light on the issue of visas, investor visas, employees visas. What is allowed within a RAK ICC structure?
Well, RAK ICC traditionally doesn't allow residency visas, but they have a fantastic product with their sister sort of company, RAK, where you can get a visa relatively easily. So look, there's a couple of options there that can explore, but probably Alan and Dr. Samir could probably give a bit more light in that area.
Yeah, and it's even going to extend into mainland as well, with going back to that previous question. So yes, we will find the solution in Ras Al Khaimah for what you need to do. I think that's the key message for that. And the fact that you can have those conversations with us and plan the solution is a key advantage to RAK.
Excellent. I see Brian is still having a few more questions. Maybe Brian, on this topic, I recommend you to connect with Alistair on the topic of Saudi setups. He's very familiar with advising clients on how to set up entities over there. Pratik is saying, I have been in the UAE since 1987 and I have a mainland company. Can my mainland company invest, which has a local sponsor, through a RAK ICC company? Alan, is the question clear?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the question is clear in terms of, yes, we can work things both ways, that the RAK ICC company can own on the mainland, and mainland companies can own RAK ICC, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I'm slowly reaching to the end of my questions that I had outlined for today. Maybe I'll dedicate the next 4 or 5 minutes to get your final thoughts on today, your final conclusions. I could get started with you, Dr. Samir. Tell us a little bit, what would be your final comments for today?
Thank you, Lorenzo. Again, thank you for organizing the webinar. I hope it's been useful for those who have managed to have the time to join us. I think all I would say is watch this space. RAK ICC will continue to grow and will continue to deliver new products and solutions. We are looking at various options and various structures as we speak. And we will keep you and everybody interested posted. But I would say, you know, we're in the right jurisdiction, and there are many exciting opportunities ahead for the UAE and RAK ICC.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Samir, for attending today and for sharing your time with us. Alan, your final thoughts for today?
My final thought, I think, can be summed up just by the word collaboration. And if that's the collaboration that you have with clients and the collaboration that you have with us that brings that all together, I think that's the key message. We've talked about flexibility, we've talked about collaboration. Those are the key messages from me. Thank you. And just again to emphasize the appreciation that we have on our working relationship with you. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Alistair, your final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again to Dr. Samir and Alan for joining us, and they've made some fantastic points. I would say to all the attendees who either have businesses or are looking to set up businesses, structuring them correctly in this country can be incredibly important, particularly if you're a number of shareholders and your business is of a sizable size with lots of assets underneath. Having the legal protection on top can sometimes save you millions and millions of dollars. So RAK ICC is a perfect jurisdiction to use for those structuring purposes. We've talked today about the robust flexibility, the fantastic various products that they have. And of course, what we've also talked about is the value of the corporate service provider as well. It's worth knowing all our consultations are free. I would implore anyone that's even thinking about structuring their business here, please reach out to me today. I'll be happy to have a consultation. So thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Alistair. Thank you, Alan and Dr. Samir. We look forward to keep working in our relationship and to keep advising clients on the benefits of establishing themselves in RAK ICC. We look forward to working more with you. And thank you to all the attendees. We had 120 attendees throughout the session, plus 100 people on Facebook. This is going to go live, and we're going to share the full link with everybody that attended. And we're also going to send it across to our client database. So hopefully there's going to be quite a few hundreds of people watching this. Thanks again, Dr. Samir and Alan. It's been a pleasure to spend this 1 hour with you. Thank you, Alistair. And thank you for everybody that took part of this.
Thank you all.
And stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, bye, bye.